Okay.
Okay, we're live.
Hi, everyone. My name is
Hello.
Deidra Demens.
Hi, I'm Ebony Duncan Shippy.
So we are here today to talk about our workshop that we're leading next Saturday.
Mhm.
Ebony, do you want to start?
Sure. So the workshop, The Shadow Work of White Supremacy, Advancing Anti-Racist Practice in Yoga Education, is a collaboration between the two of us, and we'll focus on, it's very interactive. We'll focus on lecture, discussion, and yoga instruction. But before I get into what the workshop is, I wanted to share a bit more about what it is not. Okay, so this is not at all about who should or should not teach yoga, nor is this about who should or should not practice yoga. I try to stay out of folks' spiritual business. So this is not at all what that is about. But this is really focused on thinking through ways that systemic racism in particular shapes education and how it shapes and permeates yoga education. So just as background, I am an assistant professor of education, and I focus on racial inequality in schooling, as well as racial inequality in school community relationships. And so I've thought a lot about how we can disrupt these broader forces within classroom spaces. And so really what we want to do next Saturday is start a conversation. That conversation in part is focused on these broader patterns of racial inequality, systemic racism, and how they affect education in the United States. But then I want us to take it a step further and think about ways that we can disrupt those processes in the spaces where we have influence. And so that's really what the content of the workshop is designed to do. But ultimately, we're just starting a conversation. Did you want to talk a bit about the yoga side of things, Deidra?
Yes. So the lecture discussion portion, in between that, we'll break and have a short yoga practice. And the practice is really to support all that comes up in the discussion. So it's nothing too strenuous or fast or anything like that.
Mhm.
We'll work with supported poses, but poses that gives us space to process that information. So it's more of a time to step back and kind of let it all sink in. And so that when we come back to the discussion, we have not only absorbed that information, but can maybe understand a bit more about our thoughts about it, or how what we're hearing, how it affects us, how it affects our classes if you're a teacher, or the classes that we take if you're a student, or our relationships with other students, other teachers, and the staff at the studio as well. So it's more of a supported practice in between the discussion.
And this is really, so I'll give you all a little bit of background. We are cousins, and this collaboration has actually, it's in some respects the culmination of many conversations that we've had, particularly over 2020. And it's taken a lot of different forms. And so when we landed here, I think we both felt really confident about it being a productive and fruitful way for us to think through some of these issues and to, as Deidra said, begin to kind of disrupt some of these patterns and create change in educational spaces. I don't know if you all have seen Deidra's Black History, Prominent Figures in Black History series. So that was kind of the seed. I give her all of the credit. She invited me to join. I'm I'm an educator. She invited me to join. I thought it was very creative, brilliant idea. So I'm like, of course I'll be a part of that. I mean, not to mention we're family. But I was happy to join in and do this.
I also want to say, in a conversation that I had with my mentor, we were talking about a workshop. It was like Ebony said, about the Black History and Yoga series that I did. And my teacher started to say, you know, you could talk about race and education. And I was like, I am not qualified. I am not qualified to have that discussion. And I saw Ebony posted on her Facebook page that that she was teaching a Black Lives Matter course. And then I was just like, Ebony can do it. Because I didn't think that I would, I didn't think that I could carry the conversation like that. So again, when I saw that Ebony was teaching the Black Lives Matter course, I was just like, this is just meant to be. You could do the one part and I could do the other.
Definitely meant to be. It's so funny. So my co-instructor is here.
Hi.
Say hi. Say, I just woke up. I'm in a little bit of a mood. It's okay. But yes, the Black Lives Matter course and the timing for all of this has just been incredible. I was going to say we are a close family. And so although we grew up in different places, we really still grew up together. And so it's been really cool. Although it seems on the surface as if our paths have taken us in different directions in terms of like our careers and where we live, it's really cool to be collaborating like this and to see all of the ways in which our work overlaps as Black women educators who care deeply about the overall well-being of the folks in our classes, you know, spiritual, mental, physical, emotional. And so this is just a really interesting way to bring together some of our passions, but then also to push for change a bit in the areas where we have influence.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me also. Like you said, we're both educators, but kind of went different ways with that. And when we were talking about our experiences in the classroom, or for me in the studio, it was a lot of the same stuff.
And right, that's the systemic part. You know how these patterns are replicated in very different contexts and across time. And so it's like, how could it be that you're telling me something about what you experienced in the studio, and I'm like, I had the same experience in the meeting last week, and I thought I was a little crazy. And then then I would talk to my friend who's in a corporate job, or I talk to my friend who is an EMT, like, you know, and it's just like, how do these patterns keep getting replicated across seemingly very different contexts? But that is certainly the systemic part of it.
So we talked a bit about our what we're offering, and then a little bit of the background, how we got to here. Did you want to look at a couple questions now?
Sure. Yeah, questions were great. I can't see any. I only see us.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't see us. No, it's fine. I was chatting like, I don't know if we have any questions yet, but I'll just keep chatting and fill this little time.
So someone asked if we could give an example of a talking point that we might discuss.
Sure. So one talking point that we'll discuss, kind of one of the key ones, are the ways in which systemic inequality, systemic racism in particular becomes the default. So it's like if we are, if we are in an educational space that's operating in the United States, if we're not intentionally working against or thinking about ways to make that space inclusive, then the default is whiteness. Whiteness is at the center of the space. And we'll talk about kind of the historical foundations of that pattern, which is why, so the title is intentionally provocative. But part of the goal of that, again, is to generate conversation and is to kind of identify areas of discomfort. But, you know, we will, I mean, this type anti-racist work will require discomfort. And I think that part of the title was beginning to not spark that discomfort, but to call attention to that. So yeah, so one talking point or one key takeaway would be the ways in which, you know, systemic racism is the default, and if we aren't intentionally and actively working against it, it persists.
And that's really interesting, you know, the way that you talked about being uncomfortable and then talking about how whiteness is the default. And one of the experiences I've had when I've had conversations like this with different teachers, some of the things that I'm saying that I experience or that I feel, they do not know. They don't see it, you know, because they walk into, some of the other teachers walk into the studio completely welcome. And then, and are so, and are just not aware that someone else will walk in and not feel welcome and not feel completely comfortable to open up or to be vulnerable in that space.
And that vulnerability is so important in education, but specifically when you are doing this type of spiritual work. So I believe that teaching in general is a spiritual practice. I think that we are influencing how folks see themselves, as you talked about, kind of their level of comfort. Do they feel safe? Can they open up? Can they be vulnerable? Can they make mistakes? So I think that all of that is part of teaching in general, but you're engaged, you and other yoga instructors are kind of specifically engaged in teaching around spirituality and spiritual practice. And so it's even more important that we are aware of the ways in which, when we, like, kind of, as you pointed out, when we enter spaces, we bring all of who we are in those spaces. And that means we also bring our experiences. And in many respects, we've had very different experiences in institutions in this country than other racial groups have. So, you know, when we enter a space, we're going to enter it in a way that's different. And kind of to your point, if you don't have those experiences, you're not aware of those differences. You're not aware of the kind of, I used to talk about, like, that marginality. Like, you're not aware of being in, but not of, you know, a group. So you're taking a class, or you're teaching a class, even though sometimes you might be mistaken as another student. But you're taking a class or teaching a class, and you aren't always fully showing up as you.
Yeah, and I actually told a teacher once, it wasn't necessarily a yoga practice kind of, but a Reiki training that I was doing. So still, you know, spiritual and energetic work. And some of the things that was going on, I guess the teacher could see that I was a little kind of holding back, and then they kind of took that as me being, it was interesting. I think they thought that I was aggressive. And I told her, you know, I'm coming into this space and certain things are happening. And if I'm going to protect myself, or I can either protect myself and then I'm moving back a little bit, or if I'm going to be completely vulnerable here, I have to feel safe. And I don't think it was interesting to, for me to, I guess at the time, I didn't even know that I was doing that I was kind of guarded or just really letting a piece of myself show up. But when she asked me about it, I myself hadn't thought about, why am I doing this? It was just, I guess I just knew that I'm protecting myself, and if I'm feeling uncomfortable, or if I'm feeling unwelcome, or if I'm feeling like I wouldn't be totally accepted, or I can be vulnerable and be open and be my full self, but I have to feel safe in order to do that.
And that physical reaction, I mean, it's interesting to think that you were doing that in a Reiki course, but that physical reaction, like a lot of us have tight shoulders right now. Like we're like our default is this defensiveness because we're prepared to kind of ward off foolishness. I won't. I'm sure we're all tired of the general election, so I won't get into that example. But from you carry a physical, almost like this armor, if you will, because you're as you said, you're trying to protect yourself. You're being defensive, and we're not even aware that we're doing that. That we're just walking around tense, like literally physically tense. But I'm sorry. Were there other questions? I feel like I've switched into professor mode and started going way down another path.
I think we answered this question. Okay. Someone asked if we can give an example of how you personally experienced this in a yoga class, or I guess in a yoga class, or maybe even in your class at university.
Mm-hmm. So one way I experience this often, and I know I don't look, I'll just say I know that I have a young, youthful glow. But I know, honey, that runs in our family. But, sometimes I'm mistaken for a student, which again, I don't necessarily chalk that up to a race thing per se, but there have been moments, where I'm on my camp, or when I was on campus, physically presenting myself in a professional manner. So I had on the clothes, I had the hair, I had everything. And I would ask for access to a space that's for professors, for example. And first of all, you don't know about these spaces unless you are on the faculty. So how a student would know about these spaces, I don't know. But I would have to go through these steps of proving that I'm a professor. So I remember one woman asked me for my ID, and then she asked me how long I had been working here. And it wasn't like a casual get to know you conversation. It was almost like an interrogation. And then we all have those experiences where we'll offer suggestions and no one hears it, but then someone of another race or gender will offer the same suggestion. And then it's like, that's brilliant. And that's happened across contexts. That's happened at work. That's happened in volunteer organizations. It's happened at church. It's happened kind of across contexts. I guess those are kind of just a couple that come to mind right off the top. And then you shared one too. And I think that this is not my personal example, but I've had students who have come to me with concerns about some of the experiences that they have in classes that make them feel as if they aren't safe. So whether it's the language that the professor uses, whether it's some of the cultural norms of the classroom, where a student, for example, might feel uncomfortable missing class to care for a family member because in the class rules that family member is not considered immediate family or something like that. So there are just kind of multiple ways that I think we see these, they call them microaggressions, the way that we see these types of patterns kind of manifest on an interpersonal level within an organization.
That's so interesting. I mean, I feel like this happens a lot when we're talking about this. I've had the similar experience where I walk into a room and people don't know that I'm the teacher, or, you know, when I introduce myself as the instructor, there's almost an assumption that I'm not as knowledgeable as, you know, the other teachers. And throughout class, I feel like I'm having to prove that I'm worthy for your respect and your attention. That I know what I'm talking about, and I can help. And again, and I think part of that is youth, or, you know, especially in the style of yoga that I teach, I am often the youngest person in the room. And so I do think that maybe people think that I'm not the teacher because I'm not old enough to be a teacher. But then also the way that I've seen in other classes where there's an immediate respect for the person that's leading the class, and that's not given to me. And like you said, I've had that experience, and then have talked to some of my students that have that experienced different things or heard different things while they were in class. And I think I think that goes along with people not knowing that what they're saying, how that can affect someone else. I taught a POC class, and it just so happened, it was already scheduled, but it just so happens the first class that I taught, it was right after George Floyd was murdered. Sorry, my mom.
I'm surprised she's not watching.
Right? So I taught this class maybe a week after George Floyd was murdered, and we were all feeling raw, but we couldn't even really say how we were feeling. It was just a lot to take in and to deal with. And I remember one woman explaining that she was in a class and they were doing a difficult pose, and I think the teacher said something like, "Don't worry, you're not going to be here for 8 minutes and 46 seconds." And right. And, you know, right after that, or anytime, you know, I think this is months now later, and that's just not funny. I think that's not funny, just like how we don't make jokes about 9/11. You know, and I think, you know, she definitely felt, you know, like she had to protect herself after that. And it seemed as if everything else and everyone else in the class or everything else kind of went on smoothly.
Yeah, that was I mean, to have that on top of everything else that was going on. I mean, and those are the types of experiences where she might not practice anymore, you know, or not, at least in a group. So the short of it is, we'll begin to name some of those practices, and be very intentional about about identifying concrete ways to challenge those practices when we're in these spaces, whether we are the person who whether it's directed at you, or whether whether it hurts you or not, just ways to kind of disrupt that. Well, I think that we answered all of the questions from folks today.
I think so.
Okay, great. Hopefully you all will join us. And Deidra,
Yeah.
you have the details, right? The link for registering.
I'll put that in the chat now. Sorry. So I'm going to add the information where you can go to sign up for the event, as well as the date, time, all of that stuff. I'll put that in the chat.
Let's give Biden Merchbot some attention. Looks like they wanted some throughout our chat. Hi, Biden Merchbot. Welcome.
Okay, they wanted.
They need a little bit more than attention, though. We want to thank our hosts. Thank you for having us, for making this platform available.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. And I think we'll be able to share this, and then you'll be able to share this also if you have, also the information is in the chat. So if you know someone that's interested in attending a workshop like this, you can pass on the information to them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you.